So it's great to be here with everyone today. My name is Jennifer O'Reilly Mott. I'm the Managing Director of Technology here at Do Big Things. I am based in Washington, D.C. And as Managing Director, I oversee our design, development, data and research, as well as production teams. So excited to dig in on some of the nuts and bolts of websites and how you can take some of these tools and tips that we're going to talk about and apply it to your very own sites and the orgs that you're working with. Just a quick background on Do Big Things. So we're a digital agency that focuses on working with progressive causes and campaigns. We definitely want to be human-centered in our digital programs so that we can make sure that we're leveraging authentic storytelling and harnessing our technology to better make the world just a little bit better place. We're also women-owned and led, and our staff is about 50% people of color, which allows us to really bring in different lived experiences, and so that we can talk to the folks out there who are trying to reach in a number of different ways. As a full service agency, we cover 4 prime pillars. So we have a strategy and content team, a creative service team, digital ads, and technology. So on the tech side, we do everything from digital audits to web development. We create custom tools. We talk about digital infrastructure and development, as well as digital production. One of the pillars as we think about digital technology is that we really want to hone in and think about a build, measure, learn approach. And the reason why we do this is because we really think it helps lengthen the amount of time that your digital assets will be able to stand the test of time. And it's also most cost effective if we're always measuring and optimizing for success. So that's really one of the things that we believe very strongly about. Without some making data-informed decisions, it makes it very difficult for us to reach our goals and move ahead. All right, so let's kind of dig into our agenda for today. Some of the things here, we're going to talk a little bit about a baking metaphor. So we're going to start off with our key ingredients and a solid foundation. We're then going to head things and talk about how we can mix things up a little bit. And then we're going to have the bake, or the magic, as I like to call it, where we are really beginning to layer on the different elements of our campaigns and what we can do to elevate our technology. And then the final touches, which will really, again, put us in the top echelon for different websites and the things that we can do. And each level will build on the complexity. So it's sort of like building a cake. So our goal here is to learn actionable ways you can improve your website and your digital infrastructure to meet the needs of both your team and your supporters. And why we're here today. Why we're here today. So we know that digital is at the core of all of the work that you do. But really, while digital is truly a tool, what we want to do is deepen relationships with the communities that you serve. Right? We're always going to be grounded in helping others make deeper connections with us as an organization. We want to be able to have folks take additional actions and help them rise up our level of engagement so that our community begins to grow and deepen. So we want to talk about how the role of your website plays in this digital ecosystem that you are starting to build. And we're going to talk about some foundational elements, right? And then we're going to talk about some free tools that you can use to help you begin that process. Okay, so whenever we take a look at a website, the first thing we do is the discovery. And I like this to kind of begin to think about it as we're collecting all of our ingredients, because no one wants to get to the fact that, like, as you've cracked your eggs, as you put in your flour, you realize, like, you know what? I don't have any sugar. And you have to go to the store, grab the sugar, and come back, right? And then you realize, oops, I forgot cinnamon. And then you have to come back, right? So what we want to do is take a moment here and talk about the discovery process so that we can have all of our different different pieces lined out, and we can do some analysis on that before we just start taking actions and like changing our site willy-nilly because it's the hottest thing to do. You've seen someone else do it. You've seen it successful elsewhere. We want to really ground it in the information and data that you're able to collect at your organization. So throughout this presentation, we're going to kind of keep 4 elements in our minds. One, we're going to talk about our audience, right? So for this section, we're going to talk about currently who are we reaching and how would we like to reach more of them, right? How would we like to expand our audiences beyond where we are? And again, how are we best communicating with them currently? We want to think about how we're getting them to engage with our website, our email, and our social content. What is our most successful content to date? What's working? Is our website helping get our intended message out there efficiently and effectively? And is there anything that perhaps we're doing offline that we would like to incorporate into our online work and messaging? We're going to talk about how we're measuring things, right? Are your engagement metrics where you envision them to be? If not, let's think about a path and how we are going to develop one to get you there, right? And then we're going to think about all of the tools in our tool chest, right? And what technology really can you all use to better create those experiences without going something. It doesn't have to be super expensive. It doesn't have to be something custom. In a lot of instances, you can use something that's out of the box, right? Or even free. So one of the things that I always like to do when starting to talk about websites, and especially as we're heading into 2022, is to take a look at our SEO, right? We really want to take a moment to think about how is our website ranking on the internet, right? What happens when someone is searching for the organization and the subject matter that we cover? What is happening in Google when that happens? And one of the ways to do that is to just use the Moz free SEO checker. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment. But there are a few things here that we really want to find out as we're doing this discovery. One, we want to understand what are the keywords that are driving engagement? Why are people coming to our site? Because one of the things that I find happens is that sometimes within organizations, it's those inside the organization that is driving the content, and they're not always listening to what your supporters are actually looking for, right? Like we always want to put the most popular items front and center, right? Because that is what our audience is actually coming to. We want to make sure that we have strong metadata, right? When Google is, when you're searching Google, we don't want to just have your organization name in that little snippet that's under the link, right? We want to be able to say something about your organization, and we also want to be able to grab a user's attention pretty quickly. We also want to identify our top traffic sources, right? Like how are folks coming to our website? Are they coming through social media? Are they coming mostly from, our current email list? Are they coming from, YouTube or someplace else, right? And we want to understand that. We also want to be able to get a firm sense of I don't like the term competitors, but those also within our sphere, right? Like what are organizations that are similar to us and what they are doing and how are they being successful? And we also want to kind of find out how fast our pages are loading, right? Because all of this leads to how Google is going to rank you, right? And so we have a few tools, which I'm just going to talk about, that you can use on your own site. So this Moz free checker, I just put in the American Heart Association, which is heart.org, and I was able to find out some really useful information about the Heart Association, right? I was able to immediately find out what their top pages are and what their links are, right? We want to find out where they're getting the most links from, right? Like where their top linking domains. And in this case, it's actually YouTube. So YouTube is one of the most powerful search engines out there. And so you do definitely want to put video on YouTube and link it back to your site if at all possible, as a way to begin to boost your SEO. Easy ways to do that, right? We want to make sure that you have your Wikipedia page set up. We want to make sure that you have LinkedIn profile for your organization. So these are some interesting things that you can glean from this free tool. This section about discovering your lost domain is a little less important. It just says, you know, who's linking to your site, who's dropping your link, and who is putting a site to your link on their page. What I find more interesting right here is sort of the keywords and number of clicks. So the heart association, the blood pressure chart, is one of the most popular things on their website. So we want to make sure that that is front and center, right? They're also their keyword, the top keywords that they're looking at are blood pressure. We want to know if we are doing ads, like what are the top snippets that Google is presenting, right? And we can see the list here, as well as some of our other branded keywords. And then if we kind of go down, you see who the heart association is in, you know, in the same sphere with. And it's a sort of interesting look here because they're each going to go after the same population, right? But they're coming at slightly different ways. The Mayo Clinic, we know, is a medical organization. So they're going to come at heart disease at a slightly different way than the Heart Association does. We all know that WebMD can be a very scary rabbit hole, right? We all know that when we are not feeling well and we start Googling, that we all end up at the very end of some health spectrum. So really thinking about how these other organizations are talking about heart disease is a good place for everyone to start and look at. Another tool that I suggest here is called SEO Screaming Frog SEO Spider. You can download it. It is free. It will scan 500 pages on your site. And what I like to use this for is actually to do our snippet, right? It will scan your site. You can click on the page and it will tell you what Google is returning as your snippet. And we know from this that the Heart Association actually does a very good job of putting meta description. But I can assure you that when I scan a significant portion of sites, very few have this fully filled out. And it's missing an easy opportunity for folks to find you on the internet. I will put this back down. And then you'll want to do site speed. There will be a link. This presentation can be shared, and you can easily Google site speed into Google, and you'll get something that will pop up right here. You have the Google web page, right? And you can analyze how quickly the site is, right? We want to make sure that we are optimizing for performance. So keeping those images as small as possible, compressing our video, right? Or even better, having the video on Google, right? Because it's not going to slow our site down. The next thing I want to talk about is images, alt tags, and accessibility. One of the most important things if you're kind of assessing your website is, you know, are my images representative of the folks I'm trying to reach, right? Everyone wants to see themselves represented. And so making sure we have a diverse range of images on our site is super important. We also want to make sure that those images are using alt tags, right? Because not everyone is assessing your website. They can be doing it with a screen reader. They can be doing it with, you know, something that talks back to them, right? They could be doing it all sorts of different ways. So we want to make sure that there's alt tags so that everyone can assess our content. One of the best things here is Lighthouse. And we can just take a quick look here at Lighthouse. I think I have this up already. And again, I use the Heart Association, but accessibility, they do a really good job, right? That's on a score of 0 to 100. And we can see that they have done a good job of being accessible. So I would say that this is especially important and something that, you know, we work very hard to reach this 84 to 100 status. And as you all know, there's different levels of accessibility. Reaching AA status is a really good place for folks to be when you're talking about accessibility. Also, easy thing to do is think about colors, right? Are your colors on your website? Is there enough contrast, right? If you're looking here at my presentation, the square is like a greenish blue. If I was to put perhaps dark blue text on here, it's going to be really difficult to read and therefore not enough contrast. That is also something that folks sometimes struggle with, and really thinking through what that might look like. If anyone is looking for images, free images, we use Unsplash and Pexel quite a bit. So those are two good resources to go in and start looking at different images. And I've used them in this site. Okay, and so the next thing I wanted to talk about as we're going through our discovery is looking at analytics, right? Because we cannot, under any circumstances, understand what is happening on our website unless we ground that in some data. And it doesn't have to be that complicated. We just need to make sure that the Google snippet is added to our site, which anyone here is more than capable of doing themselves. I would say another great resource, if Google Analytics is feeling a little overwhelming, Hotjar. Hotjar has a free version where you put a snippet on your website, and it helps identify where folks are dropping off, what buttons are getting most clicks. So you can actually see it. It's literally a heat map where it will go from, your most visited parts of a site will all be in red. And typically when you start scrolling down the page, especially on desktop, it will get bluer and bluer as you go. And now, while we are all accustomed to scrolling on mobile, right, when it comes to a desktop, those sort of above the fold still do apply. We also, if we're sending out emails, we also want to make sure that we're thinking about those email analytics as well, right? And any kind of CRM reporting that we're getting. That way we can have sort of a holistic picture and think about our digital ecosystem, right? Maybe we even bring social analytics in here. So now we have analytics from our email campaigns. We have analytics from our website. We have, analytics from our social, and we can begin to put them all together and craft them all together to present a unique picture of how we're being thought of online. And this is also a really helpful process because we can go back to, if you have personas or you have, some kind of variation of personas, we can begin to say, are our analytics matching up with the personas that we have? And are we creating the pathways within our site that we want folks to travel, right? And a heat map is a really good place to see, right? If folks are actually having a struggle. One of the most interesting things is, some folks will believe particular parts of your website should be clickable. And if they are not, all of a sudden you'll see hot red around a particular, we'll say, box or image. So it's a really good way to begin to form this picture. And we also will know what's most popular, where our visitors coming from, so we can begin to think about platforms we really want to lean into. All right. So now that we have sort of the baseline, right, of where we are, we want to begin to add in elements, right? So this is where my baking analogy comes in, is we want to make sure we measure our ingredients. We're focused. We're not adding an extra egg, but we're really honing in on what is our next steps. So here, what we're going to talk about is primarily around actions, right? So we want to make sure our audience, is clear on the actions we are asking them to take. We want to have a clear voice across all our platforms. We also want to know, if a visitor does take an action, do we have a next step laid out for them? How are we measuring that success? And before we even create a campaign, have we created KPIs, right? And some of the tools that we'll need to use is our website, email, social, and CRM potentially. All right. And let me just kind of hop back in. Does anyone have any questions so far? All right. Doesn't look that way. Yeah, definitely post questions here. Oh. Let's see here. We're migrating to a site running Drupal and Civi CRM. Can you recommend sources of stock photos for science education? Unsplash are good, but not quite everything we need. Ooh, that is a good question. Jeff, I will have to noodle on that, but we can definitely come up with some. We know that science is very, very tough. And I know we have used a library in the past. I will have to circle back, but great question. All right. Let me kind of go forward here. All right. So let's talk about our ladder of engagement, right? This is something that is really, really important for you as an organization to think, how are we moving someone from, someone who interacts with us casually, right, to someone who we think of as a true supporter, someone who wants to be in our community and our champion, right? And we have a number of different ways in technology to help folks begin to move up that ladder. Some of the things that we use are forms, right? We want folks to fill out a petition, right? Maybe they then fill out a letter to their representative. We know that emails, right, is someone on, if we're segmenting our list, is someone on multiple email lists, right? Are they really interested in the different programs or practices that we're working with? We might form a Slack group, right? Someone who is willing to hop on a Slack group is fairly engaged, and they would be sort of that next level. But there are a few pieces we want to talk through to make sure that we have those in place to make it easy for someone to see how they begin to climb that ladder. And it's clear for folks internally as well. So one of the easiest things for folks to do to begin to think about, okay, so we've done our discovery, now let's look at our branding. Because one of the things that we see is folks using different platforms slightly differently, right? We're having inconsistencies across our digital ecosystem, which makes it really difficult for a community member or even a casual to supporter to understand which one of these online presence is actually your organization, right? When people are using on social, a lot of times they might be willing to be more bold, right? If they have a website that they're not proud of, they're going to use social media, right? But when folks do come to their website, they're like, I don't understand how these folks can be so engaging and exciting on the social. And then when we come to the website, none of the look and feel is there, right? So thinking about how we're looking across our different systems, and it applies to email as well, right? Are we prioritizing similar content, right? Sometimes the website becomes easily stale, right? A website is very much like a garden and it must be tended, right? So you can change it out, right? Just like you change out maybe pictures on your wall at your house every so often, your homepage can also be something that's changed. Or, maybe it's some of the most popular pages on your website, which you now know you can continue to update that information and make it more engaging as you're going through. And I think the thing that you can really hone in on is really the imagery that we're using. That's a low cost way in order to keep that consistency. And also just thinking about the colors that we're using, right? And what your brand colors are. And if you don't have anything that's like a solid brand guide, just making sure that you've established within the digital team or the teams that do digital, because I know that it can run the gamut, that you're all deciding that, this color is to be used for, fonts, right? We're all using Poppins as our font or what have you. So you have that process sort of laid out in-house. We also want consistency across our pages, right? So let's just think about some of the pages on our website. Some of them are the action center, right? Our action centers. We want to make sure that all of those pages have thanks messages. right? A lot of times things are moving very quickly, and that is something that a lot of folks can forget, right? And within that thanks message, we typically want some kind of secondary action, so that whether it's share on social or maybe it's some sort of daisy chained activity, we want to be able to keep on moving. And we also want to welcome these folks into our email, right? If someone signs up on our email list, we want to be able to immediately put them into a welcome series. We also want to think about our SMS strategy, right? Like, what is our strategy here? Because it is not something that we can just throw up and expect is going to magically happen through engagement and overnight and like, let's say, get folks to attend an event, right? We really need to think about, again, SMS is part of our email strategy, as part of our website strategy. So really coming together as you're thinking about these at these pages, because we really want to also make them as simple as possible. We also want to make sure that we're always collecting data, right? Like, one of the things that I would stress is that when you're thinking about forms, any forms, whether that's your donation, whether it's your action pages, whether it's your signups, thinking about what is the least amount of information you can collect from a site visitor, right? You are going to get a significantly higher bounce rate if you start asking for a mailing address sometimes. I mean, maybe not in donation because you have to through your processor, but thinking about all of the steps, think about how you're looking at and filling out forms yourself, right? Like, I know I am very hesitant to give out my phone number because I do not want calls, right? I don't want people to call me. I'm more than welcome to get a text, but I'm not interested in getting an actual phone call. And so really kind of putting your place in the place of your community is super important. And also really thinking about source codes. And that's a little bit more of a tech heavy lift, right? Making sure that we have source codes. But if you do have someone on the team thinking through source codes, making sure that we have some kind of structure to our source codes so that things aren't getting lost and that people are being added to the right lists is incredibly important, especially as we head into election season, and something to think about. The next here is just thinking about your email, right? We know that email is one of the most powerful ways in order to reach your audiences. So we want to make sure that signing up for email is pretty much as easy as possible. We want it on your homepage. We want it on your header and footer. We also want to make sure that you have email templates that are mobile responsive and they work across all email clients, right? If any of you have done email, we know that Outlook is very pesky. However, it's super important to make sure that your email looks just as good as Outlook as it does on Google. We also want to make sure that, if you do have a CRM, maybe it's every action, they have the fast action, right? We want to make sure that folks, if they are already in the system, that they can create the fast action. And then we're also thinking, especially with email, that we're beginning to set up segmentation, right? We want to make sure folks are getting on the right list. And also thinking about your content calendar, because there's nothing worse of getting one email and then you're like, why haven't they told me anything else, right? And then all of a sudden you're asking for that folks to donate. So really having that content calendar going is also going to be super important as you're going through. All right, I'm going to stop there for just a minute. Is there any other questions? Oh, yeah, I said full screen here. No? Okay. Let's kind of go through here. All right. For this, we're going to talk about our audience in terms of making sure we're providing our community what they're looking for. We want to make sure that there's a clear path for them to continue the ladder of engagement. We want to make it very easy for folks to find what they're looking for, right? We as an organization, we want to be able to use, as we're developing content, we want to look at our data so we're making data-informed decisions. We're also going to begin to think about our personas, right? And then measuring successes. So tools we're going to use are things like Google Optimize, Google Tag Manager, and Zapier. Those are just a few of them. So now that we've sort of done our discovery, we're putting a few additional items in place, right? We're going to make action taking super easy. We want to look at how do we begin to optimize for those conversions, right? And testing. It's the only way to do it. So we want to begin to think about what are our goals, right? There's nothing worse than starting a test without our goals already in mind, right? We also want to talk about what is our sample size, because that matters. And one of the best pieces of information I can share is the A/B test calculator, which I'll share here because it will help determine when you have enough statistical evidence based on the size of your test, right? We want to make sure that you connect all of your Google systems, right? And then we want to test things like snippets, right? We want to test pop-ups because we know pop-ups are great in some times, but other times they will reduce, folks, they'll increase bounce rates, right? So really thinking and taking a beat on how can we begin to test and optimize to increase our conversions, right? So we're thinking sort of across, but I would think about creating Optimize, and I know ActBlue has like you can A/B test the donate page, right? A lot of the email clients that we're using, you can A/B test your subject line. So really thinking about how are we going to take our pool of folks and determine what is going to get them to click, and how we're going to use that information moving forward as we build. So super important to begin to engage in that process. We also want to make sure that we're tracking across our digital ecosystem, right? We want to make sure that we're thinking about our ads, our social ads, right? When a person clicks on an ad, we want to make sure that that is going to be represented on our campaign page, for instance, or our ads landing page, right? We then want to make sure that data is, where's it going, right? Because a lot of times, even though you might have a source code, you might have your Google Analytics, we need to make sure that all that data is lining up, so we don't end up with a soupy mess at the end, which if you're moving very quickly is sometimes it does happen, but if we're really thinking through the different steps that we're asking folks to take, I think it's something that we can easily consider, right? We also want to know how we're tracking our email conversion, right? Are we making sure that information is getting into our CRM? If we're hitting a button, right? If we're sending them to a petition page, we want to make sure that button is able to be tracked in Google Analytics. We also want to make sure that within our systems, we're able to personalize the ask, right? We want to be able to, there's nothing worse than if you're getting an email and it's supposed to be your first name and it ends up with being your last name or what have you. And it's because the data on the other end is a little messy, right? So really thinking through how we're getting that data into our various collection systems, right? And making sure that when we do have all of these pieces, that they're all beginning to be integrated and we can use it again so that we're seeing this holistic picture as you're moving forward. And let's sort of talk about the final touches, right? So here we want to be always asking our community for feedback, right? We want to make sure that we're, again, providing the content that our audiences is looking for. We're thinking about keywords as we're writing content and how we're handling sort of our secondary pages on our website. Obviously, we want to continue to be measuring for success. And the ways that we're going to do this is we're going to talk about surveys, pop-ups, and actual user testing. So we want to begin to think about conversion rate optimization, right? And one of the best ways to do this is to install maybe a pop-up survey so we can collect data from our site visitors, right? If we're trying to solve a particular problem or we have some questions we want to ask them, pop-up that will come up that's sort of in the corner, let's say, is fairly not intrusive, and folks, you have a good chance that folks will actually interact with it. We want to be able to, if someone lands on your blog page, we want an option to sort by popularity, right? If you have posts of any kind, maybe it's a resource page, maybe it's an action center, we want to be able to sort and feature those that are most popular at that particular moment. We want to be able to pre-fill in information, right? That if someone is in our system and we're doing a form, we want to be able to auto-populate. Similar to the way, your credit card information can be inputted if you save it to Google. And one of the things that I like to do is to update that 404 page text, because if you can get someone who searched for something, it comes up as a page not found, but you can then tell them, instead of saying like, sorry, we can't find anything. If you say, we're sorry you can't find anything. Have you seen our latest, report? Have you taken our latest action? It helps guide folks back into your site rather than them just bouncing out completely. Lastly, and some of the biggest things that you can do and that take, a lot of effort and time, if you have a team that can do this, is to, if you're starting a campaign, you are building out as maybe a microsite, maybe you're building out some action forms, you want to maybe use something with usertesting.com, or gathering, one of the ways, those at the higher end of your ladder of engagement, and recruit them to provide you feedback, right? Because the best thing we can do is get feedback from folks who aren't in our organization about our future campaign and work. Because if we do that, we are more likely to have success. So you can use a service like usertesting.com. There is a fee involved, but you also could do something as simple as a Google Sheet or a Google survey, right? With your community members. I will say that this can't be done quick, right? This cannot be for something that is due tomorrow. Don't ask leading questions, right? Because we want this to be sort of unique and get the honest opinion rather than the answers that we are actually looking for. And also believe your users, right? Sometimes I feel as if as we're going through, we sometimes put our own biases on how we think something should look or what the flow should be. But if we're hearing something differently from our test audience, we should believe them and make the change. And from here, another big lift would be begin to use your data through data visualization and really big infographics, right? Google Data Studio, it's free. You can begin to connect it with your Google Analytics, etc., to deliver amazing reports, right? Maybe you can share those out to your team members. Maybe you share them with the higher level in your community if there's a particular ask that we're trying to get through, right? If we're going to build an infographic, really thinking about the why and focusing on the storytelling more than making it as fancy as possible, because storytelling is really at the key, even though that we're trying to create an interactive infographic. We really want to have that story shine through above and beyond the coolness of the technology. And then breaking down just general statistics. I think that one of the things that I think a lot of supporters are interested in is, how close are we to our goal or our success, right? That's why those thermometers are still pretty popular, right? Like how are we demonstrating that we're making progress? And so thinking about data visualization and infographics is a great way to do this. And if you're looking for something free, Canva is a great resource to help you there. All right. And then lastly, we want to celebrate our successes. Right? One of the things to do as you're going through is we want to be able to think about and stick with our process. So through all of these steps that I've suggested you take, right, as you're going down, make sure that you're documenting them, right? If you're going to create a campaign from scratch, begin to create a checklist, right? There's a book called the Checklist Manifesto, right? And it's super helpful for all of us to have a checklist so that we don't forget the step. Like, we never forget that we need to add Google Analytics to a page if we're moving quickly, if we have that checklist, right? Develop a system of approvals. Think about how you're going to get from start to finish and who in the middle needs to see whatever kind of work that you're doing in order to not have a accidental bottleneck in the middle. Also, another tip here is don't be an island, right? Even in a small organization, if you're the only digital person, create some level of redundancy, right? You don't want to be the only one holding this, all of this information. So it's really important to share. And most of all, celebrate your successes with both your team and your community, whether that's through a blog post, whether that's through, a social media post. Make sure that we're celebrating that, because I think those pieces of information, especially as we're thinking about how to engage our audience, how to get folks to vote, right? We want to be able to, leading up to those, show the movement that we're making and the successes that we're having. So I think that kind of begins to brings us back. And I think we have two minutes left. So want to see if any folks have any questions. All right. Share my screen here. No questions? For the group, does anyone have a tool or tip they think is worth sharing? Has anyone used a free tool that they found incredibly helpful in the work that they're doing? All right. Is it better to share links to every action forms event sign up directly or to the org's website, which then links to the event RSVP? I can see the pros and cons either way. Getting people to the web versus making them take another step to sign up. So I think it's a really good question. I think one of the things that I think of when we're talking about events and signups is that you want your website to be seen as the hub, right? So I would more than likely in your events section have a snippet of the event and then have a button that would push them to the every action page to sign up. I think when we just start posting directly, folks aren't going to all necessarily think of your organization as a destination that they can do to learn more about future events. The next question is, how can we change the 404 message? So the 404 message typically is in theme settings. If you're on WordPress, it's pretty simple to do as you're going through. So if you begin to click around in some of those theme settings, it should say 404 at the bottom. You can also do it on a redirect. If you have redirect settings, you can put it on your redirect as well. How to decide on a Drupal theme that meets the needs outlined here. All the commercial themes promises the world, and it's hard to choose. Whew. I would say the Drupal, it is hard. I would say that there's no theme that is perfect, right? There's never a theme that is perfect. I think you always should go with two things. Think about what your immediate needs are. What are the most important thing that you want a new website to do, right? And start there, because what happens when we're looking at themes or we're looking at add-ons is that people start to get the but what ifs, and I think sometimes that pulls us off track. So as you're looking through all of the themes and the tools, you start with, hey, here are the top 10 or 15 things that I absolutely need, and everything else becomes, secondary as you're looking at a potential theme. Do all survey tools offer pop-up embed on the site, or do you recommend a particular one? There's a ton of different survey tools that you can put on your site. Almost all of them will pop up, right? You can even start it if you have pop-up capabilities built into your website already. You can begin to utilize that as well to start it. But yeah, anyone. There's multitudes of ones. I don't have anyone that I would specifically recommend. I would start with a very low cost option to make sure that it actually works. All right. How capable is user testing of getting testers that fit campaign target demographics? Mobile first, not monolingual, English speakers. Oof. Okay, so mobile first is quite easy. They definitely can do that. Not monolingual English speakers is a little bit more difficult. They definitely can do it, but it's going to take you a little bit more time, and also for them to source the different folks for user testing. So it's definitely worth having the conversation with them, and we have done it where we're asking for definitely mobile first and non mono English. So it is possible within their pool. It just takes a little bit longer. All right, wait another minute or two if there's any other questions. This is where I practice my ability to sit on a quiet Zoom call. All right, we're gonna say we are done. I want to thank everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. You are more than welcome to reach out to me. My email is just jennifer@dobigthings. If you have any additional questions, or if I can be more helpful in any way. This is one. How do you handle when website needs exceed volunteer time? That is a really good question. And I think, again, it comes down to prioritization, right? If a true, if you have a technologist for 5 hours, we want to make sure that we have everything lined up for them. So they can just go in and make the edits that are needed. I would say that a lot of times, especially if you're using volunteers, what happens is there's too much back and forth, especially on the technology front, because there are still decisions that need to be made that should have been decided further back in the chain. So if you can, prioritize the items for the technologists so they understand what is most important, and also when they are given a task, you can begin to give them more tasks that they can immediately action on and complete. But that is a hard one. And also use a PM tool, right? Don't try and get it on an email, or use Slack, or use a PM tool. That's also will help with your efficiencies. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate it again for you coming and spending time with me. I hope everyone has a lovely weekend, and I will see you all around the internet.